Welcome on behalf of the Creative Health SIG. Welcome to our second webinar. My name is Nicola Gill. I'm a GP educator up in Hot York, and I spend most of my week using art and creativity to teach the human dimension of care and help people to flourish in work. I'm going to just do a little bit of housekeeping before I hand over to Louise and Georgina. So, as you've discovered, you can't share your camera and you can't unmute yourself at the moment. And that's because the first part of our webinar will be in webinar mode. So we can record it for people to watch afterwards. And then Alexis is in the background, is going to enable you to unmute yourselves and pop your cameras on so we can all see each other's faces. And we'll have 15 minutes of questions and answers. And if you want to post any questions you've got in the Q&A or in the chat, and then actually when we come to that time, hopefully you'll be able to unmute yourselves and you can ask our speakers the questions directly, which is much more fun and pleasant. And then after that, if people want to stay in the room, Alexis will break us into breakout rooms, and we can have some small networking chats together before we come together again, just before 8 o'clock, just to have a closing poem and finish the evening all in the same space. So I'm now going to hand over to Professor Louise Younie, who is the chair of the Creative Health SIG, and to Georgina Haffner. And I know Louise and Georgina will explain how they met and explain the work that they've been doing together. So thank you so much for both of you for joining us, and especially to Georgina for joining us from her work environment there. It's really kind of you, so thank you.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So I think I'll just present a few things and then we'll talk a little bit about how we met, and then it'll be over to Georgina and some poetry. So just to start, this is our Creative Health Special Interest Group. These are our postcards that cover the our creative health events. So there's a QR code there. We can share all of this afterwards, but a couple of different websites and the links to the RCGP and National Centre for Creative Health. You can see in the middle we've got the human dimension, and we as a group we're thinking about the human dimension of the patient through the arts, and of the student and of the clinician, and how we might enable holistic learning, arts for well-being for patients and us, and human flourishing for the clinicians. So here's a busy slide, but there's a question of how does it land if I say to you, are you resilient? Has resilience ever done anything for you? In response to the huge burnout in medical students and clinicians globally, maybe it's between 20 and 80%, it lies somewhere in between there. The response has been quite simplistic. It's like telling that little doctor that's hanging off this enormous slide in the student image on the left there, that he should learn how to cling on better and wiggle his feet a bit harder to keep him mid-air whilst there's increasing aging and complexity and multimorbidity. And this is what happened. This is what's happening. Thousands of students and clinicians are receiving messaging that they need to be more resilient. But there's some issues with resilience, and maybe you've heard some, but the Latin for resilience is resilire, which means to spring back and rebound. But often through trauma, we need to, when we go through difficult times, we don't bounce back to the same shape, but we may have to grow around. And in material science, resilience is how much you can take until you break. And it doesn't feel like a good metaphor for our inner lives. It feels like resilience comes from the neoliberal toolbox of looking at the individual and saying that it's your fault and your failure and you're too weak if you can't be strong enough. It doesn't take into account, there's a lack of justice. It doesn't take into account the challenges and the difficulties that different people are going through at different times or have come through. And so sometimes I would say, maybe the strongest person in the room wouldn't score very well on a brief resilience scale, but actually they may be facing so many social barriers. It's taken a huge amount of strength, and that can be for our students as well as our clinicians, as well as our patients. So, there's a risk of gaslighting our students or our clinicians when someone stands up in a position of power, whether it's an educator or a manager, and tells the students or the frontline clinicians that they need to be more resilient. They need resilience training, rather than looking at the system issues. So this can lead to resilience shaming. And actually from the literature, Colin West found that the most resilient doctors still burn out. So flourishing, it's an ancient concept. It's actually like translated Aristotle's eudaimonia around meaning and purpose. And there's a paper around the wicked problem of physician well-being, and they talk about the increasing clerical burden and performance metrics that come against us. And that is a risk of erosion of meaning and purpose, which is, the meaning and purpose is exactly what the flourishing is about. One of my students described flourishing as a kinder way to grow. And thinking about flourishing spaces, often we talk about it as a place where there's a little ASK acronym. So in fact, I think there's another slide on that. Let's have a look. I'll come to that in a minute. I think I'll move on. I'm going to give you some descriptions of what the arts can do to help with flourishing. And these are some of the things that students have said over the years. So for example, one thing that really struck me about the process was how calming it was. There was no talking in the room for 20 minutes because of how busy everyone was making their own art. All you could hear was the rustling of materials, the gentle sound of pencil against paper. Or it felt nice just having to focus on myself and what I was creating. There was silence in the room, apart from paper ripping, people cutting, each consumed by what they were creating. Well, since I've come to university, I never feel truly I have time or space for myself, just to slow down, sit back, reflect. It's like a light that's constantly turned on. And this whole week of engaging with creative arts helped me calm down and almost clear a space in my life to have time for myself. The periods of silence through the week are when I think I was able to sort out a lot of feelings. So these students are describing a different kind of space to the you must be productive, high-speed medical education space, for example. And I call this a flourishing space, a space where we can hear ourselves think, connect with ourselves, connect with others. And the arts, there's so much research, particularly Daisy Fancourt, and her book has come out about how the arts benefit patients, but there's very little. How often are we using the arts for the well-being of clinicians or students in higher education? And Daisy writes, this is a piece from The Lancet, and she writes about how her recommendation is to expose ourselves to as many aesthetic experiences of as great a diversity as possible, and that there's a dose-response relationship. And by the way, binges don't work. So there's something about doing something regular, whether it's creating, looking at stuff, making music, dancing, all of those things. And this was an article that was in The Guardian, I think from research at King's, that actually being amongst images that are the original art actually reduced cortisol, as did looking at reproductions, but not as much. So there's some, there's benefits to us, and maybe we're not tapping into it. It's an area I'd love to see grow. Another benefit is this idea of shadow work. The arts can open the door to embracing some of the difficult stuff that we face. And so these two trials with patients and with medical students showed that when randomized controlled trials, and when they wrote about really difficult or stressful experiences compared to nootropics, at 4 months down the line, the asthma patients had better lung function, and the rheumatoid arthritis patients decreased disease activity. And similarly for the medical students, the writing group had a stronger antibody response. The writing group to difficult experiences had a stronger antibody response to Hep B vaccination. So it actually does something to us and to our bodies, engaging with the arts. Georgina, this is a quote of yours. I have been presenting it quite a bit. I just find it so powerful. Is it okay for me to mention, or do you want to?
You can share it, absolutely. I don't mind.
Amazing. So I met Georgina in year one, and you started exploring poetry on the creative arts course that I've just been giving examples from. And you've continued to do that. And I've had the privilege of staying in touch, and now you're an FY2, I think. But I just find the wisdom in your words and the courage and the work, it illustrates so well some of the power of this work. So just going to read a little bit. Through grief, foundation training and creative practice, I came to understand that many aspects of healthcare resist neat categorization or resolution. You go on to say, this is, I feel like one of the most powerful explanations. The writing, the poetry did not resolve the grief or the exhaustion or the uncertainty, but allowed you to remain in relationship with them. So I think without further ado, we can come back to that. Let me stop sharing. Going to hand over to you, Georgina.
Thank you, Louise. I'm conscious that there's a noise in this room. I found an empty radiologist room. I don't know. Can you hear?
We can't hear a noise. It's great.
Okay. No, all right. Good. So yeah, my name's Georgina Haffner. I'm an FY2 doctor currently working in emergency medicine in the East Midlands. And I'm on shift at the moment, but I've taken a break. And as Louise said, we met during my first year of medical school at Queen Mary's, and during that week's SSC, I wrote a poem during a poetry workshop, which kind of set me off writing poems from that point onwards. I just felt I was able to put into words things that I hadn't really ever been able to do before, and it stuck with me throughout experiences of grief, foundation training, and yeah, my clinical practice. So I have some poems that I'd like to share today, and they're in chronological order. So it's starting with that first poem I wrote back in first year, and then during medical school. Oh. And then one following my mum's death, one when I was on placement in year 4, and then a couple from my foundation training. So this is the first one. Easing into uncertainty is like lowering myself into a pool of cool water. I live with not knowing each time I lift my head and take a breath. Sometimes tears bubble to the surface and start to fill my goggles. My fingers are windscreen wipers. It's hard to go with the flow, but I'm finding my rhythm now. When I realize I've reached the deep end and I don't want to get out. So that was a poem that I wrote during the SSC, and it really helped me to voice, I guess, the uncertainty and ambiguity of living with my mum's illness. She had MS, and yep, I felt like I wasn't. It was cathartic writing it, but then there's also the benefit in sharing it with other people, and it's something concise, and I hope that people feel something. So this next poem I wrote to share at her funeral, and it was inspired by Michael Rosen's poem, These Are the Hands, that he wrote for his NHS kind of collection. Yours are the hands that guided mine, tenderly tutored, crossing T's and dotting I's. Run the perfect bath, gas and air, curly hair, little lungs once wheezy, take deep breaths, glide through water, deeper sighs. This heart that thumps, eyes that well, tears that pool, hands that hope to heal. Mistress of one-liners, laugh to medicate. Yours are the hands that guided mine. Tenderly, here comes the tide. So the next poem, well, since knowing Louise and being able to work with her, I wrote my year 4 dissertation as an autoethnography, which is it's a type of biographical writing where as well as an ethnography where you're looking at yourself kind of as the the thing that's being studied. And I wrote about losing my mum as a medical student, and that process. So whilst I was journaling for that and writing poems for that on placement, I wrote this next poem whilst I was in Harlow on my obs and gynaes placement. On the walk from Harlow station to my temporary isolation, a car pulls over. Do you know where the funeral home is? Asked an Irish lady dressed in black. I'm not sure, I'm sorry. Sorry for your loss, and sorry I can't help. Lost in Essex and mourning, you and me both. The sun is lying low in the sky, breaking through gaps in branches and hitting my eyes. Now I can't see the wood or the trees. I've been trying to make sense of the incomprehensible. In my spare time, I grasp at causality and chronology. In the daytime, I'm here to study obstetrics and gynecology. I witness mothers giving birth, women losing tubes, losing babies, losing dreams of having babies. By 9:29, at 9:29, I see knife to skin. By 9:35, two tiny twins. That's a very precious kind of magic. I sow seeds in the ground of my fertile imagination, nurturing ideas immaculately conceived in this institutional accommodation. Ripe for writing, what happened? What really happened? This too is a labour of love. I had 16 years worth of mothering, give or take. All of a sudden, the days are getting lighter for longer, and I'm 28. So the next two poems I've got to share are poems that I've written since being a doctor. The first I wrote not immediately after, but after verifying my first death. I think that was in November, but it wasn't until December that I kind of felt I had a bit more capacity to write about it. But I journaled about it at the time, and then I came back to it. I hold my stethoscope and two fingers to the mottled skin of a still warm stranger. Their family watches me, and I avoid looking at my stopwatch. I like your sister's piercings, previously hidden under a Venturi mask. Must be the worst part of the job. And I thought about their denial of the inevitable, asking us to perform the impossible before I've even had breakfast. Actually, this feels meaningful to me. The love evident in the room, it's been palpable all week. Now 5 minutes have passed, and I'm carefully lifting eyelids to shine a little light on fixed and dilated pupils. And the final poem I have to share was written actually on this ED rotation. So I think it was in April time. And amidst my dad moving house, I'd gone back to his now old house with my brother. And it was all a bit stressful because I was working here and I needed to travel back. Anyway, this is the poem. Dad lets them grow wild for the insects and butterflies. I'd been dreading coming home, turned up to ED teary-eyed. Her hair that morning, matted with blood, couldn't get through it with a comb. Hi, my name's Georgina. What's your name and date of birth? I stayed with her. Lunch came and went before getting on a train. Picked wildflowers in my pajamas, then left them at Mum's grave. And yeah, that's those are the poems that I had to share today.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Georgina. Very precious, very beautiful, powerful poetry. I wonder, do you want to say any more about, the process? I'll open up to everybody in a minute, but maybe, the process of writing and how that's been, I don't know, like, does it take courage to kind of stay in touch with that, or how is that for you? Like, we know it's hard to be FY1, FY2, it's a difficult time.
It does, and I feel like it's because I meet, like you said, the job's not exactly easy, and I meet so many different people in so many different situations. writing the poems, especially when it's like an encounter that moved me, it kind of helps to give it permanence. Otherwise, I don't know, these experiences and encounters are just kind of lost to the day, or that kind of thing, or the week or the month, and I don't know if I like sharing.
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't necessarily feel brave. I don't know. It feels a bit unorthodox sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It feels important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it feels there's a lovely quote in a paper by Scannell who talks about, actually she's quoting someone else about being a bride to amazement. There's something about, living one's life and being present to it. I wonder if we might, I had a couple of pictures I might show at the end, but I wonder if we might open it up, because people are putting things in their chat. I don't know if you can see them, Georgina, but it'd be nice to move into the next section, perhaps. I think people might have some questions, thoughts, reflections, responses.